I thought it might be interesting to go through the most Googled questions about Jehovah's Witnesses. It's been a while since I've done anything like this, and honestly, people have lots of questions about them. And who better to answer the questions than an ex-member who was in the cult for 18 years? Anyways, let's take a look at the most Googled questions about Jehovah's Witnesses. Let's get into it. I'm sure this goes without saying, but I've been heavily affected by changes on this platform, just like most creators have been. So if you like the work I do and you want to see me continue to do it, consider supporting me on Patreon. I also have a Teespring where I sell shirts and stickers and cups and whatnot, so check that out too. And I have a retro game store where I sell stands for games and controllers for every system from the Nintendo to Xbox One. And finally, one more thing I want to mention. I have a Discord and I'm pretty active on there. It's also where I do my podcast, so if you want to join, then there's a link to it and everything else I've mentioned in the description. Okay, now let's answer some of these questions. I started out by Googling, do Jehovah's Witnesses? The first result was, do Jehovah's Witnesses believe in Jesus? A few lines down is, do Jehovah's Witnesses believe in the Trinity? So I'll knock both out here. Yes, Jehovah's Witnesses do believe in Jesus, and no, they don't believe in the Trinity. They think Jesus was God's son, one of the angels. But that's not all. It gets more interesting. They also think that before he came to earth, he was Michael the Archangel. They basically think Michael the Archangel was God's first creation, and then Michael created the earth and everything around us. It's kind of a weird theology built on sand, and they're the only ones who think it. Scholars in the field have examined the claim and read the old manuscripts we have in their original language and determined that the belief is built on a misunderstanding. There's more to cover on this subject, but I'll get to it when I answer the Trinity question. Next up is, do Jehovah's Witnesses vaccinate? The answer is yes, they do. They don't have a huge problem with modern medicine outside of the blood transfusion thing. And honestly, that's a pretty big problem because blood is used for all kinds of things, like making some medicines. Jehovah's Witnesses were banned from using those medicines for a long time. Not just banned from taking blood transfusions, but a while back they announced that using blood fractions, like platelets or something, is a conscience matter. Pretty much saying the governing body is unsure of how God feels, so you can roll the dice if you want. If you're right, and God really doesn't have a problem with you using medicine with blood fractions in it, you may make it through Armageddon. If you're wrong, then it's over. And that's pretty much how they present it. So as they won't outright disfellowship and shun you for your decision, they scare the shit out of you by telling you that you're risking your immortal soul, to put it in layman's terms. At any rate, they don't really have a problem with modern medicine, and I've come to understand that lots of congregations actually have a big problem with alcohol and anxiety medicine misuse because of the stress they're under 24/7. So take that for what you will. Next question. Do Jehovah's Witnesses salute the flag? The answer is no. They don't salute the flag or say the Pledge of Allegiance. In fact, they've actually faced serious persecution over it. I knew the two girls who fought in court for the right to not say the Pledge of Allegiance in school. I knew Gaithy Barnett the best, although she was Gaithy Edmonds when I knew her. You can find out all about the court case if you Google her maiden name. The leadership knew when they made the call for Jehovah's Witnesses to stop saying the pledge or saluting the flag, it would mean serious social repercussions, beatings, and more. And they did it anyways. In my eyes, that's on their hands. The whole ideology plays into how they want their own government, and they don't want their people to swear allegiance to anybody but them. The next question is, do Jehovah's Witnesses vote? The answer is no. Same as before, they don't want their members to be politically involved in any way. They want them to view the governing body as their de facto government, under quote-unquote Jehovah's headship. So no voting, no political activity of any sort. Next is, do Jehovah's Witnesses have funerals? The answer is yes, but it puts a lot of people in tough situations. If the person who passed away is a Jehovah's Witness, then they'll hold the funeral and everything at the Kingdom Hall. And of course, people who've spoken out in opposition to the religion are not welcome. So when my mother dies, since she's a Jehovah's Witness and I'm an apostate, I won't be invited to the funeral. She wouldn't want me there anyways. Next question. Do Jehovah's Witnesses believe in God? The answer is yes, but the next question is, do they believe in the Trinity? And since this ties into the belief in God, I'll explain them together. Lots of people believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. It was passed down from Catholicism and worked its way into lots of Protestant denominations. Turns out it's completely fabricated. The Trinity was made up hundreds of years ago. Words were changed in manuscripts by monks. We know this because we have copies that don't have mentions of the Trinity Trinity in them. Remember, the printing press didn't exist at the time. If you wanted something copied, then you had to do it by hand. So somebody would come over from a neighboring town and they'd copy something by hand. This actually led to lots of different types of errors. Like, for example, we have enough copies of the Gospels Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John to see where somebody would make a copy and their eyes would skip a line on the page by accident. Because of how Hebrew and Greek are written, you can still piece it together and have it make sense, but it completely changes the context. Or you'd have another type of error where they'd accidentally turn one too many pages. That kind of thing happened all the time. Or they'd just outright change the story to something they liked more. And that's what happened with the Trinity. Bart Ehrman talks about the Trinity all the time. He's a scholar in the field and can straight up read Aramaic and ancient Hebrew. He's a fascinating dude to listen to, honestly. Anyways, Jehovah's Witnesses are right about the Trinity. It was fabricated. But they use that as a wedge. They tell people that, and when they go research it and find out that yes, they are right about this, it makes them look more credible and trustworthy and opens the door to believe more and more. Next question. Do Jehovah's Witnesses drink? Yes, they do. And as I said a minute ago, it can actually be a pretty serious problem. There are lots of congregations that drink entirely too much. They say you're allowed to drink, but you aren't supposed to get drunk. Getting a little tipsy is okay, but blacking out or something is wrong. Problem is, it's really hard to tell if somebody's had too much. Some people can hold it together flawlessly, even if they're completely out of it. Next question is, do Jehovah's Witnesses celebrate holidays? The answer is no, they don't celebrate holidays. There isn't a blanket reason for all of them. They just provide shaky reasons for each. Like, they'll say that they don't celebrate birthdays because anytime the Bible mentions a birthday party, somebody loses a head. And the Bible doesn't mention if Jesus celebrated his, so they skip it. With Christmas, they don't celebrate it because it has pagan roots. Again, one of those things they're technically right about, thus adding to their credibility and making them seem more believable by an outsider who's interested in the religion. But a while back, I talked about something I've noticed in most extremists. I call it placing exaggerated importance on an event or idea. Is it really worth separating yourself from an entire societal event over something so trivial as pagan roots that are long gone by now anyways? Like, how far removed from a vaccine does blood need to be before the vaccine is acceptable to take? How far removed from paganism does Christmas need to be before it's acceptable to celebrate? In the end, it's really all about separating their members from society as much as they can. Although for what it's worth, they are allowed to celebrate wedding anniversaries, which is ironic in its own right, considering how pagan weddings really are. Don't get me started on the pagan roots of the wedding ring, but they still wear those. Next, I googled some different phrases. I typed in, why do Jehovah's Witnesses? And here are the results I got. Why do Jehovah's Witnesses not celebrate holidays? I feel like I covered that one pretty thoroughly a minute ago. Next was, why do Jehovah's Witnesses go door to door? The reason they go door to door is based on a verse in the Bible. Here's what their website says about it. Jesus told his followers to make disciples of all the nations. That's a quote from Matthew 28:19 and 20. So that's their reason for knocking on doors. That verse is used by lots of groups to do the exact same thing, like the NIFB, or some versions of evangelical Christians. Next up is, why do Jehovah's Witnesses not take blood? I covered this a little bit earlier, but let me cite their biblical reasoning. They're taking it from a few verses. The first one they cite is Genesis 9:4. It says, you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. Then they cite Leviticus 17:10. I will set my face against any Israelite or foreigner residing among them who eats blood, and I will cut them off from the people. Remember, this is during a time that the Mosaic Law was in effect. That ended after Jesus died, although in their defense, there's something about it in the book of Acts too. But that's why Christians don't have an issue with eating shrimp or wearing polyester clothing. I could end it there, but just for good measure, I'll take it a step further. The word used in Leviticus is pronounced ahal, or something close to it. It means to devour, to consume, to be eaten, to cause to eat, or to feed with. It doesn't say anything about medical procedures. Now, I understand that they didn't have a medical use for blood at the time, but if God really didn't want them to use it for medical procedures, you'd think he'd inspire the writers to be a little less specific with the ban. He could have had the writer put, don't use blood for anything, instead of don't consume blood through your mouth and into your stomach. So as far as I'm concerned, the rule is doing nothing but making people sacrifice their lives to the Watchtower Society, or as they view it, to God. And that's something that God never demanded, human sacrifice, save for 3 specific occasions. Once from Jephthah, when he agreed to sacrifice the first thing that came out of his house to greet him when he returned from war, if God helped him win it. Once when God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, but that one was called off, so can you really count it? And finally, when God had Jesus sacrificed for everybody's sins. Out of 66 books, 1,189 chapters, and 31,102 verses in the Bible, only 3 very specific instances include God asking for a human sacrifice. So the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses are sacrificing their lives to the Watchtower Society, since it couldn't possibly be God, should be pretty concerning to them. Next question. Why do Jehovah's Witnesses not have Windows? Look, some Jehovah's Witnesses just prefer Macs, and as a Mac user, I can respect that. Now let the jokes about the guy who's dedicated his life to pulling people out of cults is in the cult of Apple ensue in the comments. In all seriousness, I do not understand this question at all. Like, not even a little bit. I have no idea where this came from. And it's an extremely common question. It's got me completely baffled. Jehovah's Witnesses have nothing against Windows as far as I know. Next question. How much money do Jehovah's Witnesses have? This one's honestly kind of hard to answer because it's a private company. They don't have to publish their finances. But I will say this, they sold their headquarters recently for more than $1 billion. I forget what the final estimate is, but I think it was between 1.3 billion and 1.7 billion. Just for one set of buildings. That's a lot of money. It should give you some context for the types of numbers we're working with. Next is, how many members do Jehovah's Witnesses have? They have 8.5 million members. When I started YouTube about 3 years ago, I remember they had about 7.9 million members. So they are growing. In the US at least. They're straight up going in the negatives every year in lots of European countries, and they're growing slower than population growth is, so I'll take that as a win. If we continue to work on this, then maybe we can get them to stop growing completely, and maybe even start reversing it. Next question is, how do Jehovah's Witnesses dress? They dress in a modest way, to use their term. They're pretty serious about women wearing appropriate shirts, and one of the governing body members went off about men wearing tight pants a while back. He's convinced that the fashion industry is run by people who are the opposite of straight, if you catch my meaning, who just want to see people wearing tight pants. It's actually pretty comical to hear him go off on a rant about it. But there are lots of grooming rules. No beards, no long hair on men, no tight pants on anybody, that kind of thing. And when they go knocking on doors or go to the Kingdom Hall, they're supposed to wear full suits, ties and everything. Next question. How do Jehovah's Witnesses know they're anointed? That's a good question, but it's kind of complicated. I'll give you some of the basic theology. Basically, they think that after Armageddon, 144,000 people are going to heaven, and the rest are going to live in a Garden of Eden 2.0 on Earth. The 144,000 people are called anointed. So the question is, how do you know if you're one of the 144,000? How do you know if you're going to heaven? The answer is, you just know. You tell somebody high up, and the governing body or somebody else in the hierarchy basically determines if you're anointed or not, presumably based on your record in the religion. For a while, they thought once they reached that number of 144,000 anointed people, Armageddon will start. So they were accepting everybody they could. Then they realized they had too many, and Armageddon wasn't coming, so they basically started kicking people off the rolls. So they're pretty picky and choosy about who they consider to be anointed now. But every year, they basically hold communion, where they pass around wine and unleavened bread. Every single person is supposed to touch the plate of bread and the glass of wine, but the anointed people are the only ones who are supposed to eat it. Next question. How do Jehovah's Witnesses make money? I'm going to take that as a question about the membership first, then I'll talk about how the leadership makes money. The answer is, strangely, there's a disproportionate number of window cleaners in the religion. Like, they're all window cleaners. It's weird. They own companies cleaning windows for businesses, and everybody in the congregation will join in and become part of the company. Maybe that has something to do with the question earlier about why Jehovah's Witnesses don't have windows. Anyways, to answer the question about the leadership, some of the money comes in through donations, but naturally, window cleaners and more generally, people who are discouraged from going to college don't have much to donate. So what they've started doing in the past 5 years or so is they had all the Kingdom Halls sign the deeds over to the leadership, so they'll perpetually pay the Watchtower Society a mortgage, even after there's no loan present. Then they've been consolidating the Kingdom Halls, basically doing exactly what airlines do when they overbook, packing as many Jehovah's Witnesses as they can into the Kingdom Halls, and selling off the unused ones. In some cases, they'll have the congregation build a new Kingdom Hall since they're working for free, and they'll sell off the old building. So that's how they're making money and staying afloat with all the lawsuits they've been dealing with lately. Next question. How do Jehovah's Witnesses explain dinosaurs? They are what's called called Old Earth creationists. So they don't make any claims about how old the Earth is. It could be billions of years old for all they know. But they think the Adam and Eve story is a real, literal story. So at some point in time, God created the Earth, and then a few billion years later, he created Adam and Eve. This opens up all kinds of interesting questions, because the Bible says that Adam and Eve were vegetarian before they ate from the tree. It said sin entered the world and death through sin. So did dinosaurs just not die? It's a glaring inconsistency in their belief system, and I honestly haven't heard a valid explanation for it. So there are your answers. I thought this was a really interesting subject. I might do more of these on cults in general or something at some point. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to make sure I can continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, you can support me on Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring. I'm trying to make a shirt design for every cult I've covered. I haven't gotten every one, but I'm working on it. So check it out and see if your cult is up there. Second, you can support me by checking out my game shop. I sell controller, cartridge, and game box stands for every system from the original Nintendo and Sega Game Gear to the Xbox One and Nintendo Switch. So give that a look too. And finally, if you want to support me in some way other than monetarily, you can check out my other YouTube channels. I have a retro game channel where I answer questions like, why does Shy Guy have a mask? And why are CRT TVs the best way to play retro games? I also have the podcast where I talk about stuff I don't feel I can say on a monetized channel. And finally, I have my main channel where I talk about cults. I wish I didn't have to worry about dancing around subjects carefully in the first place, but I chose to do this as a full-time job, so unfortunately I rely on YouTube's AdSense and on the support of patrons to continue doing the work I do. Anyways, check me out in all those places if you haven't already. Thanks for listening, guys.